Let's see if this works. Hi. Let's see if I can get this. Hang on. I'm switching from using an external camera to my laptop, which makes a bit of a challenge because now I have to control the camera and the live feed from one place far away from me. So let's see if I can see. So let's see if anybody joins me here. There we go. Now I can see the comments. So let's see if anybody joins me on this new live feed. I'm going to confuse everybody. I'm going to have to figure out a new way to do this because this is not conducive to me doing any demos if my live feeds keep cutting out. Let's see. I'm going to keep going live, but I'm going to stop. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stop into the group real quick and make sure people know to connect to my new live feed since my video camera seems to be causing troubles. I'm going to put a post real quick. If I can reach it. There, join my new live feed. Someday I won't have to do this all by myself. All right. I think it's working. So it's going to be a bit of a slow start. Oh, well. Every week some technical difficulties, right? So I am now working off of my, my laptop camera. Hopefully it's feeding the sound out of my microphone. So if you're here and you're connected, could you give me a quick shout out in the comments and let me know that you can hear me and that you can see me, because it's really difficult for me to tell from this end if this is working. Anyway, looks like I have a couple of viewers who found me. Say hello in the comments if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? And can you see me okay? Because I'm having trouble deciding if this is even feeding. Yay! Thank you, Dawn. Oh, I've been trying this experiment with my phone camera, which allows me to do some of these demos at different angles, but it seems to be a little bit too much for the live feed to handle. So we're just going to do this off of my laptop camera today, and I think I'm going to have to figure out a better situation for internet or live feed. I don't know. Like I said, this is all a grand experiment for me. I'm still learning. So welcome to a very fumbled, get it? It's Super Bowl coming. Very fumbled Facebook Live once again. And for those of you who may be stopping in later, I'm Amanda Baxter with Shiny Nine Fibers. I'm the dyer and the other people as well. So I'm also the technical person who does the videos poorly. So welcome. I was talking a little bit about, in the previous feed, I was asking if I'd like to get a little bit of feedback from people. It seems to me that there's a lot of people jumping ship from Facebook, and I want to continue to offer these demos, but I am not sure if people want to continue watching these demos on Facebook. So add in the comments at any time you're watching this, either now or later. Let me know if you want me to continue to do demos on Facebook or if you have any suggestions for elsewhere, so I can try to get the information out as best as I can. For now, I'm doing them on Facebook because it's the only thing I know how to do yet. And then I'm working on also sharing them later on YouTube so you can watch them another time. So maybe I have figured out how to post this on YouTube later and you're watching it from there. Hooray! So anyway, so today the demo I was going to do is a little bit more of, it's a demo, but it's also an experiment. I haven't done this technique in years, and so I am just going to figure it out while we do this together. Um, Dip dyeing is a way to create a really nice, slow transition, a really nice, smooth transition of color from like an ombre effect or a gradated effect on yarn. I used to do it a lot. I like to do painting now because I like to control the lengths of my transitions, which I like to keep fairly short so that colors shift fairly quickly across a warp so that you get lots of color change. With the dip dyeing, I find it's a little bit harder to do. You can, unless you fold it and hold it well. So it's something I haven't practiced with in a while. So what I'm doing is today I'm going to take advantage of some old dyes that I had in my fridge that I've been needing to use up. So I've got, you can't even see them now, but I've got a bunch of jars that were in my fridge full of some old dyes from, I don't, very old. So they have dye potential, but I have no idea what exactly dye potential they have. So we're just going to experiment with this color on yarn. So for the color I'm going to show you right now, this is a reddish purple. And I don't know how much of what color is going to actually work well for this. So what I've done, when I'm painting yarn, I typically soak my yarn in activator in soda ash, and I get the activator into the yarn before I put the dye or the paint on the yarn, and then the paint or dye will activate as it goes onto the yarn. In this case, what I'm going to do is more of an immersion dye bath method. So I am going to put the dye and the activator into this bucket of water. I have a recipe. If you've watched my immersion dye recipe for cocktail colors, it's that exact recipe, just divided in half because since we're dip dyeing, we're not putting all the yarn in there. So I just made half of my immersion dye recipe. You can watch that video. I actually put the instructions on doing that, but so that's what I did here. So this is just tap water. It's roughly room temperature, give or take, and some salt, about half the weight of your goods. And then this is some random amount of some colors that I am going to pour into it. I don't like to throw away old paints and old dyes, but I don't always use them up. And after they get too old, I don't want to put them on anything where I have an expectation of a color. Therefore, I save them for experiments. So I'm going to stand up, and I'm probably going to see if I can still be in the frame. Ta-da! Hey, you still see my face. Great. So what I have here are some warps that I've measured and scoured. These are the same warps I use in my shop. They're 3-yard lengths because I wanted to keep it short. I've got 6 of them here, and what I'm going to do is line them up by the cross. So how you choose to do this will be really kind of dependent on how you want to weave the yarn later. So you might want to fold it multiple times so that the transition repeats multiple times. You can do that. Since they're short warps, I'm just going to fold it over once. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up all the crosses to one end, and this isn't going to center exactly on the warp because, as you know, there's waste, loom waste. Let me move this back here. And so if you try to dye the very center of these pre-measured warps, they won't actually be centered on your loom because some of that is waste. And more of that waste tends to be on the cross end, usually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these 2 ends up. This is a very short warp, so it's only 1.5 yards long when I fold it in half, like that. And then I'm actually going to shift it a little bit to make the cross end a little bit longer. And what I'm hoping for is that actually centers it on the warp a little bit better. So I'm going to do a dip dye that starts dark in the middle and then goes lighter to the other end. And by moving and shifting the cross end a little bit, making it a little bit longer, hopefully the center of that color transition will be roughly in the center of this warp. Again, without knowing which loom it's going on and how much exactly loom waste I'm going to have, that just depends on on you and your process. So it's not going to be exact, but it should still be very pretty. So all I'm going to do, before I start, with immersion dyeing techniques, usually I put the yarn in the dye and let the dye saturate into the yarn, and then I activate it. Let me duck down a little so you can see me. This time I'm going to actually activate the dye first because I'm going to control where the dye goes, and I don't want, I want it to be activating as it's gathering onto the yarn. So I have my soda ash pre-measured, and I dissolved it in some boiling hot water, and now I think it's fairly cool now, but I'm just going to go ahead and add that and begin. I forgot a spoon. Let me grab a spoon real quick, or a stirring rod to kind of get that absorbed in there. So this is an activated dye bucket now. Once it's done, it's done. And I'm just going to dip this yarn in here. Depends on what you want to do. If you want one end to be completely white, maybe you don't go all the way into the bucket. It can also, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the very end of it in the dye the whole time and kind of move it around, and slowly I'm just going to kind of dip it into the yarn. Like I said, it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm not sure exactly how fast to dip it in, and without having measured the color ahead of time, I'm not sure how much to move it, or how much to put it in and how much to keep it out. The key is to try to very slowly add color up the yarn. And you can do that all the way to the other end. One end is going to always remain in the dye so that it continues to activate. So this is probably a lot easier if the bucket is a little bit lower than where I have it right now, because right now I'm having to lift wet yarn above my head, and it's kind of heavy. So this might be a better method to do on the ground. And I work the one end that I want darkest in the dye the most, and then from time to time I dip it down in there to gather a little bit more color. Then I might put a little bit more of the white end in there and just keep moving the dark end up and down. And it's just a method of building up color. And the trick is that you kind of have to continue doing this for a while. But you very slowly work one end in, but you keep the other end in the dark color the entire time, and slowly but surely you will create a nice smooth transitional color. And I would continue to do this for 15-20 minutes at least, up to an hour if you really want to get it smooth. And then at the very end, you could probably I would take a bucket or a container of some kind, and I would just drape one end, let's see if you can see that, into, I got a lot of warps here. Oh, try not to let go if you can. This would have been a good time to use some zip ties, but I'm just going to set. So if I had to put all of these ends on a zip tie, I wouldn't be struggling so much to keep them in order. There we go. So I might dip this one end in just a little bit farther. Whoop. Pour that out. Or I'll just use another container. I'm making a bit of a mess because I'm trying to watch myself while I'm doing this, but you could put the undyed end or the very lightly dyed end in here, and if you drape the end of that yarn outside of the bucket, that color will sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, the color will kind of move up and over the yarn, especially if your yarn is extra wet. So I maybe squeezed just a little bit too much dye out of there. So that's one way that I've done dip dyeing in the past. Again, this is, I'm quitting early, so I'm not building up the color very well, because I wanted to show you there's another way, another method I've done in the past that involves two colors, and I find it actually works better if you use a bin like this to do this next method, something flat that's easier to move the yarn back and forth in. I just don't have one in my studio right now that's deep enough for the amount of dye I'm using. So that's what the second bucket is for. In this bucket, I have a whole bunch of jars of blues and greens that I need to use up. And it's the exact same amount of dye over here, or the same amount of water over here as over here, and just some amount of some old dye. It'll come out a bluey greeny color. We'll see. And what I'm going to do now, then I'm actually going to take that white end and I'm going to put it in the green. I'm going to put my gloves back on. I should have had my gloves on this whole time. I'm not doing a very good job keeping the dye off my hands today. Let's see. Whoop. Sorry. Move that aside so that I can get down here so I can see you. All right, so now I've got a green color over here and a purple color over here. And I might leave these in their respective, oh, you know what? I didn't activate that green. I should probably activate that green. Be real sad if I didn't do that. All right, now it's working. Don't ever forget to activate. I have forgotten that in the past. It's real sad to watch all the dye go down the drain later. So I am going to take these and swirl them around a little bit, and then in order to create the color transition, after I've kind of moved these around for a few minutes, I would say like 4 or 5 minutes like this, you can actually start to move one end into the purple and then the other end into the green, and create the transitional area that way. So this is messy. This is going to drip everywhere in between these two buckets. And it does kind of pollute one color into the other, but since they're activating, it doesn't, the strongest color will be on one end or the other. I'm going to move a little bit more of this purple into the green. And then for this method, you would just kind of go back and forth like this for maybe like half an hour. And then at the end, you would maybe, you know, like 20 minutes at least, half an hour. And then at the end, you would just leave the middle of the yarn sitting in between the two buckets and you would let it finish activating. How long to let it activate? I find these dyes take, first of all, it depends on the temperature of your studio. So my studio, oh, I am making a huge mess. Hold on. Let me put a towel in between there before it starts dripping on the floor. But I find this studio, I don't have a heated studio right now, so it's a little bit chill in here. Let me turn it this way a little more. It's a little bit chill in here, so my dyes take a little bit longer to activate in the cold. Okay. Let's move this over into the green a little bit more. This will be pretty warm. And you kind of just eyeball how you want the color transition to be. You pick it up, you can't know exactly what the results are going to be until you wash it out, which is why this is kind of a method that you got to practice. And again, these buckets make it a little bit difficult. A flatter container like this would be easier, but you got to make sure you have a container big enough for the amount of yarn that you're dyeing. But I would move it back and forth. I would leave it in the dye for at least a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours. I find overnight is how the colors develop the best, especially if you leave it sort of in the middle like this, the colors might soak up into one or the other. But you could also be, oh, look at that mess I'm making. Goodness gracious. I'm making puddles. I didn't plan for that. This is why I keep lots of towels and I put drop cloths down, because inevitably I am a messy person. I make a mess I didn't intend, and then it kind of contains that problem. But let's see if I can kind of take this out so you can see. The lighting in here is pretty poor, but as you can see, I've got purple on one end and green on the other, and a really smooth transition in between. I might actually move this purple into the green a little bit more, leave it in there for a minute. and let it really get into that purple a little more. But it's just sort of an eyeballing. You just kind of have to move it back and forth until it looks approximately the way you want it. And then you wash it out, you evaluate your results, and then you change your technique based on what you want to actually happen when you do this method. So that's why I don't do this method. I haven't done it in a long time, and I find it to be, it's something you have to practice in order to get a result that you want. Whereas like with painting, you can be a little bit more precise on where the color goes and how the color transitions. But this is a really great way to get a very smooth color transition, if that's what you want. If you want it to be without any breaks whatsoever, if you want the colors to combine and shift very smoothly, this is a great way to go about it. And for me, it's a great way to use up some old studio dyes. I went through I emptied out like 9 random jars because I keep everything. The dyes that I use, the Procyon MX dyes, in their powdered form, they keep for up to a year or 2 maybe in their powdered form, depending on where you keep them. If you keep them sealed and you keep them in a dry place out of the sun, they keep for a year or 2 in the jars. But once you mix them with water, they do start to they start to break down a little bit. So I typically try to mix the dyes that I need directly from their powdered form into the paints I'm making so that they're as potent as possible when I use them. But sometimes I have some left over and I'll put it in the fridge, and if I have enough left over, I will use it over the next couple of weeks on different yarn. After about 3 to 4 weeks, though, I don't find the dye potential to be, I find the dye is still really good, but I don't find it to be predictable. So this is, I love using these methods of experimentation to play around with dyes that I can't really guarantee will come out one way or the other, but I know they'll still come out really nice. So when this goes to wash out, we'll see what the final result is. I'm just keep moving it back and forth as I'm talking to you, and I keep it moving in the bucket. And then, yeah, once I get this done and washed, I will definitely post some pictures of the results of this. I can't even see. I see Dawn, Karen, and Evie are all with me. So, do you have any questions about what I've been doing? Be interested to see if I get pale colors anywhere. I probably won't, because I pretty much saturated everything equally. Now, if I'd have just chosen to do one color and then dip dyed it and left the other end white, then I would have ended up with paler colors. Also, if you want a little bit more control over how dark or how light, it might be better to do, you could do this a couple of times with pale colors and build up color sort of like you do with indigo. Some of the, when people dye with indigo, they typically have a dark vat and a light vat, and the light vat they use to build up color more than the dark vat, because the dark vat tends to just strike too dark. And with MX dyes, it's a little hard, because as soon as it's on the yarn, it looks kind of dark, but it's about activating it on the yarn. So it's like how much is it activated in the bucket and how much of it is activated on the yarn. It's kind of just depends. Depends on your studio temperature. It depends on your dyes. It depends on how long it's been in the dye bath. And all I can say is it's sort of a process of experimentation. This is one of those methods that everybody, you just do and you learn. But I'm just I might leave this purple end in the green a little bit longer, because I want this to get a little bit more green on it. Now the green bucket's starting to look a little more purple. They're both starting to look a little bit closer to each other because I'm polluting them back and forth. But because I put the 2 ends in and left them in there for a little while in the beginning, they should be pretty bright on the ends, even though the color is starting to pollute the buckets. So you don't want to leave them in for too long that the dye that's in there has activated and isn't going to fill in the center of the yarn. So I would just give it like a couple of minutes in the original color and then start to shift it back and forth. I'm going to leave the ends of these yarn, the ends of these warps, sitting in the bucket for a while after this. I'm probably not even going to come back to it until Friday because I have to leave the studio here in another hour, so I'm not going to have time to wash these out. So I'm just going to leave them sitting here for a couple days, and then I'm going to wash them out and see what happens, because that's my schedule. I don't want to leave it. I don't want to take it out too early because I want the colors to be saturated, but I don't want to. I just do the best I can. So a lot of what I do in my studio is just based on my schedule. There we go. Is that your microphone on your chest? Yes. So because I'm careless and have butterfingers, it is a lavalier mic with a clip that I broke within a week of owning the mic. I just dropped it on the floor and broke it off. So now I've got it taped and pinned to my chest. It's supposed to be clipped, but yeah, I broke that clip. I tell people I'd be a really good tester for durability because I'm really good at breaking things. I'm very careless. All right, I'm just going to leave that to sit. And it may actually, some of the dye from this one might pull up in this direction and this one might pull up in this direction. But I think for the most part, the dye is going to stay in their respective buckets. Which, interestingly enough, I'm going to keep this purple end. Since I started the purple a little earlier, I'm going to move more of the purple end into the green bucket and leave it there. So this is just the very end. I'm just going to leave it just barely in the purple, which is why I think having the shallower pans is a little easier, because then I could put more of the yarn in the dye to sit and soak. But here we go. So thank you for yet another troublesome, technically difficult Facebook Live. It's just going to be this way until I have a chance to change the situation. So there's really not much I can do about the internet in this basement, but I can use my laptop, which seems to be working a little bit better, but the frame rate's a little low and my feed is a little wonky. So bear with me as I get better at this. Does anybody have any other questions? Do you wear a mask? I do not at this point. The only time I ever use a mask with these dyes is when they're in powder form. The powder is super fine, and it would be just like anywhere else you work with superfine powder. You just need to protect your lungs from particulate. I can't speak to what happens with the actual dye itself, the chemical dye. The MSDS sheets don't indicate anything particularly bad for your health, but I also don't know if there have been any long-term studies on that. So I only use the mask when I'm working with the powders. Once the powders are in the liquid, they're not going to get into your lungs. So we're good to go. I should wear gloves more often because I don't know, when you put dye on your skin, it absorbs into you and the dye is in you. Over time, I think especially if you're dyeing for many years with lots of dyes, maybe that's not so good for your health. But again, I can't say for certain because there's never been a long-term study on MX dyes specifically. I am doing a gradient in a way. I'm hoping that's the result that I get. But again, it just kind of depends on as I was talking to, if I moved it around back and forth enough, or if I dip dye long enough, which in the half an hour that I had for this demo, I can't really do. It is a bit more of a physical process to go from dark to light on a yarn. You just kind of very slowly want to dip that yarn into the dye bath over the period of about a half an hour to an hour if you really want it smooth, and then drape it off the end of a bucket so the lightest end is sitting outside of the bucket, and put into something that if it does draw up and into the yarn that it can drip down into a pan. But I'm hoping that this does actually graduate in color from green to blue smoothly, but we'll see. You know, like I said, I haven't done this technique in many years. I do know an artist that does this regularly. She's the person that actually got me interested in painting yarn way back when I was in the Kansas City Art Institute. I will add her name to the comments below because she's an incredible human being and an extraordinary artist who I believe is now setting up studio space in the Leedy Volkus Gallery in Kansas City. Her name's Debbie Barrett Jones, and if you want to see some just extravagant dye work, she's an incredibly talented weaver and dyer, and she's kind of the reason why I do this. So look her up. She's the woman who does the Healing with Weaving project in Kansas City with Children's Mercy Hospital, and I support her endeavors in that because the hospital means a lot to me. That's where my sister was treated, and it means a lot to a lot of families in the area. So, yeah. Anyway, if there aren't any other questions, you can continue to ask questions in the comments, and I'll check in on them. I will probably post this to YouTube at some point if I get to it, but we'll see how this goes. I'm just going to keep going at it and being my awkward self. Thank you, and take care.